Welcome to the J.D. Levy & Associates Calibration Point podcast. Our podcasts are designed to bring a conversational exploration of key topics that we believe will provide value and insight to those serving in the nonprofit sector. We will highlight new developments in the field, latest research, and things we're learning from our own clients that we can share. If there are topics that you would like to see explored, please send them to us through our website at jdlevyassociates.com.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today to the Calibration Point podcast. And today I'm excited to have Linzy, who is a longtime friend of mine and is executive partner and Emeritus at Jerold, Panas, Linzy, and Partners. Jerry brings a multi-dimensional kind of aspect to major gifts and, is an expert in this area and a real pinnacle in the field. And love and excited to have him on just to talk about just things that he's learned from major gift donors. And as so many of you know, there's a spectrum on how we define major gifts, and we're going to allow Jerry to kind of lead us in this discovery process. So Jerry, thank you for being with us today. I'm super excited. As we think about major gifts, as you know better than I, there's often this spectrum, and a lot of times major gifts just get diminished, unfortunately, into labels about dollar signs as opposed to relationships and emotion and planning. To even talk about the idea of lessons that you've learned in your career from major gift donors, can you help us just to put some understanding to what in the world is a major donor to begin with?
Well, typically, I would say to you that there are a number of things that we look at for that. First of all, if we look at financial capability, is obviously an important factor. So we would look at net worth and annual income and family obligations, generally speaking, and generally only speaking, over age 55 is a plus. And it would typically prior gifts to your charity. The bigger the gift, the higher the rating you would give that person as a major gift to be qualified. The other thing we look at, of course, is that for special or major gifts, they're infrequently given, and they have to be asked for. You don't typically get those unanswered, though those do happen, and there are some projects that I've been involved with where people got very excited about a project, whether it was for children's or for a burn center or a hospice, whatever it might be. They're so motivated by that program that they would voluntarily make a large gift to you. But generally, it has to be asked for. It usually has to be for a specific purpose. Donors want to know how their money is going to be used, and is it going to be used for the right thing. And then it entails decision making on the part of the donor. It's not something they think when you're asking for a major gift, and that depends on the donor, of course. It could vary depending on that donor's capability, but it is one of those kind of things that they're going to look at, and the higher that ask is going to be, the more decision making they're going to take to discuss with their financial planners, their attorneys, trust officer, whatever it might be. So you just need to take that into account, and that becomes clear to you as a development officer or a major gift officer. If you're looking and doing the cultivation and the stewardship correctly up to that point, then you know those things before you make the ask. So I found almost always the major gift is an emotional gift, and it remains throughout the process. Though, as I say, the larger the gift, the more rational it becomes. So if you're asking me for a $50,000 gift, that may be, if I'm got that capacity to give, I may just write you the check today and say, gee, this is really great, thank you. But if you take that process and ask them for a $500,000 gift or $1 million gift, then they're going to want to say, I need to check with all the people that advise me and see how this fits into my financial planning and my family's needs and all the rest. So then it becomes a more rational decision than emotional. But if you've done the work correctly in terms of the cultivation to bring the donor to that point, then the rest of that is not something that would be unexpected.
Excellent. And, just listening to your thoughts around that and the idea, which I've heard you say before, just the focus on annual giving. And when we execute similar pathways that we would in major gift relationships to annual giving, we're able to help a donor who, maybe is giving $1,000 now give $1,500, or to now give $3,000, and those same donors that are increasing their annual giving that same intimacy and relationship and diligence in the relationship then carries over to larger impact gifts as well. And I think I'm glad to hear you say that as well here. And then also when I've listened to you before, because it seems that gets lost in the field a lot, that we start to really, I guess, lose sight of, to your point, the emotions, and listening to you and your description, the diligence and the planning that goes into how we give. And also, I think, understanding how important that is, that it starts an annual giving program. So yeah, I really appreciate your context there, Jerry.
Yeah, the annual giving program is really a critical first step or component of what you're trying to do. So because you look at an annual donor that may come to you through direct mail or telemarketing or personal solicitation or special events, but that's that personal solicitation which allows that gift continuum to go on, because in a major gift it's almost always personal solicitation. And then if you look at the ultimate gift, that long-term gift, which could be a planned gift or just a very large gift for your organization, that is predicated on a long-term relationship, as well as often using maximum peer pressure or leverage to get that donor to cross the line to where you want them and for what they're going to do. So the annual fund is really very important in that process.
That's good. I really appreciate that. So when you take that understanding, then we think about the donor, which is so much of where you've spent your career working in relationships and helping people to really find their potential in the organizations that they care about, and those organizations knowing how to connect with their donor. We kind of titled today as lessons learned from major gift donors. When you think about the things that have really impacted you over the years, are there one or two or three, what are the highlights that you look back at your career and say, wow, I really learned that, or this was really affirming, and or here's something I didn't understand until donors helped me to see it. Is there anything that really sticks out to you?
Well, gosh, we probably don't have time for all those, because I'm a slow learner sometimes. But there are, what I have learned over time is that donors are going to only give to the organizations that they trust and that they have confidence in. And then today, for example, with so many people working at virtually and not in their offices, and with people who may not want to get out and travel or visit, et cetera, with COVID and all the rest, then they really have to have trust, and that has to be sustained in the kind of way that you keep in contact with them. Just as a sidebar, my son is a development officer for a hospital system, is a VP,
oh, wow.
and so he's been working virtually. And so I asked him, how has that impacted your major donors? And he said, I continue to call on a frequent basis just to see how they're doing, what they're doing. And, after a number of those calls, he said, they finally say, Chad, we'd love to talk to you. Please call us anytime, but we know you've really let us know what it is that you expect and what we're supposed to be doing. So you don't have to keep calling us every week or every other week or so on to do that. So there was a relationship there that really helped. So, but right. It is the fact that they trust you to be able to do that. So the other is, I suppose, and this is somewhat out of the development officer's hands, but it needs to know, and that is, donors want to know if the institution they're supporting is using the funds prudently, if they are efficient at operating in a way that gives them, again, confidence and trust in the organization that my money is being well spent, it's being well used for the purposes. And of course, it goes without saying, for any first year, I would hope any first year development officer would understand that if you solicit a donor for a gift for a specific purpose, that money be spent for that specific purpose. Because if you don't do that, and they find out, they won't be giving to you a second time. So an organization with high impact and who has an impressive effectiveness that will do that. And then I think I'm not sure what order I would place these, but in part, it's about mission, and you have to remember that people give to mission and not to needs. And so if you you've got to have a vision. You need to be able to spell it out. So it is that creates that emotional tie, that emotional giving at the outset, even an annual giving that helps get that relationship started. Excuse me.
Right.
Suffice it to say, you're a prudent steward of the funds and you operate efficiently. The other is, I think, and this one is critically important in my opinion, and that is, don't say no for anyone. You will get nothing if you never ask.
Right.
So you want to be sure you ask for the gift. And even if you don't even know the person and haven't done anything, if you meet a guy on the street, you have a 50-50 chance of getting a yes. And so it's just one of those things that it's hard to learn, but you never know until you ask. And so you don't say no for the donor, ask and make them say. And this, where you are, may not get the answer you want the first time, but then what I have found is that there are like 4 questions that we kind of refer to them as the magic questions, and that is, if you're in this process with a donor, and they haven't quite decided yet that they want to make a gift. They haven't said no, but they haven't said yes. Then I typically want to ask them what I call to be the 4 what I refer to as the 4 magic questions. One of those is, Jamie, we've talked for a while here, and you seem interested, but you haven't yet said anything to me that I came here to hear. And one of those is it the institution? Is there something about our institution that you don't like, or that needs to be explained further, or something that you have more questions about? And if you said to me, no, it's not that, then I would say, well, is it the project? You seem excited about the fact that we're doing A, B, and C, but is it the project? Is this something that has no interest to you or minimal interest to you? And if that's not the issue, then I would simply say, well, is it the amount? I've asked you for $500,000 for this project. Is it the amount? Are we asking for too much, or is it not enough? Is that a factor in your thinking? No, that's not it at all. So the final question that I would ask is generally, is it the timing? Is this not a good time for you? Because we can do this, you can pledge this over 5 years if you like. We can do it in other ways. It doesn't all have to be in a cash gift. It can be a planned gift in part as well. So is it the timing of the campaign? How can we make this so that it fits your schedule? And I can assure you that you'll get a response from one of those questions, maybe all of them, but you'll get 4 questions. You'll at least find out, A, they're interested, they're not interested today, or no, they're not interested at all. And when you get those kind of responses, then that way you know what to go to the next step, which is to say, when can we meet again? What do I need to give you to help you feel good about this project and this gift?
That's great. So yeah, is it the organization, is the project, is the amount, or the time? And then clearing those objections so that you can have that next conversation. I love your magic 4. We'll have to remember that.
Well, there's also that whole point, Jamie, also about, and you mentioned it, and that is, what I would say is a takeaway is that objections really are your best friend, and
right.
in a solicitation, because at least that gives you some idea about what they're thinking when they start objecting, and generally always you can turn that back to them in a positive way if they have an objection. So at least you learn more, and you learn that by making sure you ask open-ended questions, not questions that could be answered yes or no, because that doesn't give you much information. And you think we're a good hospital? Yes. Well, okay, fine, thank you. Or do you say, tell me what you think about our hospital or our institution, right, or university? So then when you start getting objections, you can do that. There's an old sales process that uses you've heard this, I know, or at least I think you probably have, feel, felt, found. Right. And when you get objections, you can just almost always turn it back to say, yes, I know just how you feel. And I felt exactly the same way when I was asked for my gift, but here's what I found and what I could do, and so on. So it sounds pat, and it is, but it's a good way to handle almost any objection that you get. The only one I found that hasn't worked very well is when I've been talking to someone who say to me, when I've asked for the gift, they said, "Well, who said I could give that amount of money?" And so then that's always been hard for me to answer, but because you get it occasionally, who said that? And so you can somebody better than I am could answer that one, I suspect.
Well, I like that. Feel felt found as well, and it just, that process and your 4 questions does bring it back to, it's at the end of the day, it's all relationship, and if we're not building the currency of trust and the relational connection with the donor, it really doesn't matter. And your point about it reminds me of the Wayne Gretzky quote, and that was that you miss 100% of the shots you never take. We have to be willing to what you're saying here, Jerry, to ask, and donors have shown you that over the years, that hey, you've got to be willing to ask. People won't give or won't give as much if they're not asked, and won't give as often. And people want the opportunity to make a difference. And
that's right.
That's the obviously the relational component to that, which is so critical. I'm sorry. I was going to say the other point. It's probably better said by saying you'll be hurt more by those who would have said yes and were not asked than by those who would say no. So that's probably a better way to say it. So you would be hurt more by those who would have said yes but weren't asked than by those who were asked who said no.
Correct.
I think that is a beautiful lesson learned, and a great way for us to capstone this. I'm going to put that one in my hat too. That is a great quote, Jerry. Really appreciate it. And thank you so much for your time, and look forward to our next podcast coming up with Calibration Point. And in the meantime, from there, Jerry, thank you for your time and your sacrifice in serving others.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the J.D. Levy & Associates Calibration Point podcast. If you have comments or ideas for future episodes, please reach out using the contact page on our website, jdlevyassociates.com.